Hello, so I'm doing a book review, the Create, Explore, Design on the Parker Inheritance, and I want to go ahead and start with the summary, just to make sure I have enough time to fit in thoughts and suggestions. So a few things is it had a lot of different storylines in it, and I thought that was very interesting. There's a lot of analysis as far as characters looking back on the past in regards to African American um, communities and families and the way they were treated and so there was a lot of that. But the overarching premise of the story was um, there was two characters, Candace and Brandon, who were I guess you could say the main characters. Candace was your typical protagonist. She was perhaps the primary main character, and Brandon was also a main character with her that worked together with her. They became friends in search of solving a mystery about Candace's grandmother's mystery that she was trying to solve, I guess. Um, and Candace's grandmother was a very prominent um, member of the community who was trying to solve a mystery that would, as was rumored, I guess you could say, provide a lot of money for the community um, of Lambert in South Carolina. And so she tried to solve this, and in the midst of trying to solve it, she tried to tear up a tennis court of a very um, significant African American community. And at first people thought she never found anything because she was fired. She was disgraced from the community for going for tearing up the tennis courts, and members of Candace's family said that she never found anything. And it turns out that she did find a bracelet um, with from the character of whom the mystery was laid out, the treasure hunt, I guess you could say, which was James Parker, and he used to go by a different name of Reggie. Um, and so it was very interesting, I think, because these two kids were working together on this solving this mystery. Candace's grandmother had passed away, um, and Candace's mother did not want Candace to go after this, and she didn't know until the very end of the book that she was doing it. And Candace's mother was just furious that Candace's grandmother had, done what she did, which destroyed her reputation and the family name, um, and a lot of people, or a lot of African Americans in the community of Lambert, were furious with her as well because she was a prominent member who was supposed to do a lot of great things and didn't. Because in the end, it didn't really matter what she did before that because she did something that was kind of unforgivable by destroying the tennis courts. And there's a lot of lessons about race in the book as well. They would do kind of a back and forth with the story of Candace and Brandon trying to solve the mystery, and then flip back in time to the story of Reggie, Candace's grandma. And so kind of that back and forth um, was very interesting because, I think with Candace and Brandon, we saw kind of how they not only did the author, Varian Johnson, do a great job of portraying how the African community was treated back then, but she would also talk about, how it's treated now and how there's still that racism, but it's not presented in the same extreme ways. For example, Um, I guess you could say it's done a little bit more, like the racism isn't as blatant now, but it still happens. Brandon was mugged and not really mugged, I guess you could say, but he was hit by another kid who was a bully. Um, and the kid seemed to be targeting him, not really mainly because of his race, but because also the book hints many times that Brandon is gay, and but it's that kind of discrimination where this bully consistently throughout the book is targeting Brandon because he's different and because he's different skin color, he's gay, he's someone that reads girl books, or I should say girl books, because I read girl books, I guess you could say, all the time as a kid, and I had no problem with it. I mean, some people might have thought I was gay or wondered maybe, but it's just I have no problem with who I am. But I have that luxury. I'm not as likely to get picked on for it. Someone who's also African American, I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess the way they're treated, and I'm people may have wondered about that about me, but didn't care as much as if it's someone they can target more easily, like an African American person who is also gay. Um, and so anyway, throughout the book, they try to solve this mystery, and they start with 4 clues, and they end up finally solving all the clues. They go to a lot of very prominent locations throughout Lambert, significant places to those past character storylines. Candace's grandmother and James Parker. I can't pronounce the name. It's like Sealbon, maybe pronounced as a B, Sealbon. But anyway, a lot of those characters, Reggie, who's also James Parker, he changes his identity later in the story. And they do a lot of that. They eventually solve it. They figure out all the clues, they solve it all, and they get this key to a safety deposit box. And finally, they loop in. First, they loop in Ellie Farmer, who is sister, and she helps them. She agrees to help them. She's a little skeptical at first, but she does agree to help them. And she's Brandon's sister, I should have said, older sister. And then finally, Brandon and Candace's parents get looped in as well. So I apologize, I'm a little out of it just because I've been on antibiotics still for a couple weeks now. But the other thing too is they loop in LGBT and a lot of that discrimination. So there's a constant theme of discrimination, how it's changed over time, how it's being handled, the ways in which I guess that we as a culture try to attack anyone we can discriminate just because they're different. And so like Brandon, for example, says he would use his portion of the money to open a basketball summer camp for LGBTQIA. And also Candace's father, towards the end of the novel, turns out to be gay, and that's why him and Candace's mother had split. And that was why Candace was actually in Lambert, had moved to Lambert at the beginning of the novel during the process of the divorce and all of that. And so Candace, finally at the end of the novel, gets to learn that information from her dad. And Candace provides, I think, a really good lesson to kids in today's society about, just because they're gay doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. And Candace, I think, provides a good role model for how to view loved ones when they come out as gay, that there's nothing wrong with them, still love them, and all of that. So that was really cool. And Um, it was actually very neat at the end of the novel as well. There was like this little scene where it turns out that James Parker had actually met Candace, and and um, and Candace had, as a very young girl, had turned out to be the only one originally to know who James Parker was Reggie, because he whispers in Candace's ear that he's Reggie. But because Candace is so young, she can't say the name Reggie, so she keeps saying like, like Feddy and the but it was funny because this whole time Candace had known who it was, but she couldn't tell her mother or grandmother who that was. And so it was a really great novel, and I recommend maybe reading it as a class. I just being honest, I worry that a lot of students won't read it because there are a lot of dry moments, and unfortunately, in today's society, kids don't easily get involved in books or engaged in books like we used to as kids. And I think that perhaps doing a read along through maybe the whole book, like kind of a reader's theater, I think that would be a great way to handle this book. Playing out the roles, different students. But every student at one point or another is required to play a role of a chapter, for example, something like that. And I think that would be more effective, because I think otherwise you're going to run into an issue where students aren't doing the reading. I know in general it seems like primary grades, if you could do this maybe in high school still, it is multicultural children's literature, which says it's good for all ages, right? But to the standards, because this is, I believe, designated as grade 4 through 8 book, it might not be allowed in high school by the administrators in the curriculum. So, but in primary grades, I know they usually don't have homework. So, and like I said, I think that there's a lot of value in the book. I think there's a lot of great lessons. I think it is a valuable thing to have the students read and then discuss it as a class. And I think that overall, the main lesson that can be learned is that being different is okay. Being someone who's from a different ethnicity is okay. Being someone who is gay is okay. Just because you're different doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means you're different. I think we're all individually different anyway. We're all individual people who have our own value in different ways. And over time, society's catching up to that. But so I would say that I recommend the book to be used in the classroom with some stipulations. I also think that, this book teaches that we need to stop judging people just because of, different groups, LGBT, different ethnicities, races. And I think overall, that we've had a really bad history in a short, young, we're a young country, right? Even though we're a young country, we've done a lot of bad stuff. Like we've destroyed Native Americans, and we've, had slavery and drastic racism in our country. And so I think that this is kind of also a lesson on recognizing that we've messed up as a country. There's a couple graphic scenes in here where, Brandon hits the concrete and his, head's bleeding, and just the sound of his thud that Candace describes. And also Reggie was mugged by the white people of his rival tennis team, of Reggie's rival's tennis team, who was a white school who got their butts kicked by a school that had colored people on the tennis team. And he got like knifed and all sorts of bad things and barely survived. So, there's lessons to be learned. I think it's a great book. I would recommend it. And I think also the quote of, there's I don't have it in front of me, but there's even though you can't see the path doesn't mean it's not there. And that's also, I think, a great way to see life. And I'm going to leave it there because I think I've said a lot.